then you've got like pop culture, and you've got like, Jordan Peterson, who's kind of just wrestling around this whole idea and like
Who
dragging
doesn't
us
want to
along.
commit?
Yeah,
Doesn't want to
yeah.
get baptized.
It just
He
won't,
believes,
right?
but he doesn't want to get baptized. So,
No, and we're like holding on to this.
I mean,
it is crazy. Like Russell Brand, like who would have expected,
Right?
That to happen? So.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the I'm Telling God About This podcast. We have a special guest for you today. Our friend Marlon Gutierrez, who is the VP of Marketing for Christianity Today, reached out to me out of the blue. He's a fan. He's been listening to the pod, and he was just really encouraged by the content that we've been putting out, and the tough topics and the different discussions we've been having. And so I was excited to say, hey, Marlon, you want to jump on a podcast with us? We would love to talk about your experience in marketing, your story. Marlon is a new believer. He came to Christ several years ago. And so we're really excited to really hear Marlon's story about, how his journey has now brought him into being able to market as a mission, to be in the evangelical space. And for me, that's something I'm really passionate about as a marketer as well, because marketing Jesus, in my opinion, is the coolest job, because we have the best message, the best pitch, and it's, hey, we want to give you the best good life now and into eternity. So Marlon, with that, welcome, man. Glad you're here.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I've been listening to you guys pretty early on in my journey, so it's a full circle moment over here. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I would just love, Marlon, to know, like, what prompted you to just initially reach out? That was just such a cool moment for me. And I was like, oh, this is so cool.
Yeah, so it was I had been meaning to for a while, actually, because I'm usually listening to what you guys are talking about. It's a lot of topical, a lot of really good culture pieces that just fit well with my thinking and the way that I'm kind of going through things. So I saw one of the year pieces that you were doing, particularly talking on the subject of teaching sexuality to children. And there was another person on my LinkedIn that you were interviewing, and I saw Nick there, and I was like, oh, I know him from the I'm Telling God About This podcast. So I reached out there. It was just worked out.
Yeah, that was
So-
Justin Batt, and he is a
Yeah.
leading figure in fatherhood. And he's a cool guy, great friend. And that was a really cool moment too. So I think it's safe to say I've arrived at famedom now.
That's right, I guess.
You all can get in line, hop into my DMs.
We're just gonna start putting Nick's face on all of our thumbnails, just so that we could get some
Yeah.
clicks.
Well, that's so funny because if you're not
Nice,
like,
nice.
some of you guys may have thought, oh man, I'd like to do a podcast, or maybe some of you guys have podcasts yourselves, and so it's really funny because you do this, and for us, we're all very old friends, and we're talking about things that we would talk about if we hung out, which is kind of like where this all came from. And so it is funny to hear people like coming from the outside, because sometimes I think we forget, even though we know it's the goal, like, hey, we want to get subscribers, we would love to increase the reach, but when we find out like other people are there and are like a part of that conversation and they connect to you in the real world, it is kind of a cool experience. And it kind of reminds you, it's like, oh, wow, God is doing something with what we're doing here, which is the whole, impetus for doing it. So that's super cool to hear, how that happened.
Yeah. No, you guys are putting a lot of effort into it. And I mean, we can talk about this a little bit more, but it's all about, marketing and how we kind of see marketing in a distinction of what most organizations see marketing as, because we are in the faith. And what you guys are doing, even if it is internally, you guys are practicing that, church environment and talking about all these different topics that you would otherwise if you were in person anyway. It does have an impact with everyone that's listening in and those people that are having these videos referred to. And that's how I came about it. I was looking at other videos, and then YouTube just recommended I'm Telling God About This, and then I started listening. I didn't even realize it just kind of started playing, and then I liked it, so it worked out there.
Nice.
Well, I'm encouraged, Josh, by your comment and yours as well, Marlon, because I think for anybody listening right now, like, I would love, comment if you feel the same way, but that's our heart. Like, the reason that we're doing this is because we were having hundreds of these conversations, and you know how you have this moment or this time together and you say, man, we should have just recorded that to edify and bless other people. And I think that's what I'm so excited about this. You know, we of course want to be professional, want to put our best foot forward, but I think more than anything else, we want to represent the body of Christ to the world around us, and not have this, you know, posturing mentality. It's like, no, like, these are the things that Christians talk about, think about, process in our culture around us. We don't have to go hide under a rock or behind a closed door and talk about it. And so, Marlon, I would love even your view of marketing in this space, right? Because you're in Christianity today, so you have the ultimate vantage point of what does that look like today in our culture. What are you seeing in the marketing landscape as far as the evangelical community is concerned? I'm just very curious.
Yeah, so I think it's a really fascinating time. I came into faith about 2 years ago, and I think
Wow.
it's right on par with the whole cultural movement that we're seeing. There's this spiritual awakening that's taking place. There's now data that's validating that it's actually taking place. So it's not just in our heads, you know. So what's really interesting is that a lot of this growth isn't happening within the four walls of the church. It's showing up in mainstream conversations and entertainment and politics and tech. There's all these mainstream areas now that are talking about Jesus, and it's pretty amazing. So when I was working before for tech companies, you know, I had a very streamlined vision of what marketing needed to be, and it had to be, you know, focus on growth. You're helping these startups grow, they get acquired, you make money. In many ways, you're working for that idol of trying to have that financial success, and everything is data led. Like, you're making decisions based on certain patterns and not necessarily, you know, anything else outside of that, because that's going to lead to that big reward. So when I got laid off in September of last year from a startup, a company that I was working for, I had for a while just prayed that my talents would be used and my faith would be used in my workplace, because that was the final puzzle that I needed to fully live in my faith. And you know, that ended up working out in December. The position at CT just kind of came about, and it was so fast and sudden, and I didn't have a lot of time to even wrap my head around what was going on. But it was definitely God led, and I had to understand how marketing is different now, because you know, I had all these years of working as a marketer outside of ministry, and I think that the biggest thing now is that I now see marketing as a tool. It just like money would, you know, it's neutral. The value lies on how we steward it. So
Mm.
whereas before I was just obsessed with metrics and customer acquisition costs and conversion rates, data
Sure.
was my compass.
Hmm.
And one of the biggest mind shifts was not being led by data alone, but adding in prayer and my faith into the decision making process. So
Dude,
that in itself
I
changed everything.
I got to stop you there because there's so much like, oh, so and even in my work, right? Like in ministry, right? In the military, every other job and every other factory, you know, that's exactly it. We have data, right? Like we look at like our up and down rates for vehicles. We look at how many
Yeah.
rounds we have. We can look at like the combat effectiveness by ranges, and we do like you know, sticks lanes where, you know, we can see how effective a team is at accomplishing an objective. And then when it comes to my job, which is the spiritual, you know, growth and shepherding of the Christians, and also, you know, those other people, like from a Christian perspective, I'm trying to reach the lost in my unit. The data is, well, one, it's hard to quantify at all if you're making, because there's not really a good way to capture it, so you try to look at all these anecdotal ways, and there's this feeling a lot of times of like, am I even accomplishing something, because you can't quantify it in the way that you're used to, and the way that executives, which commanders, executives are used to receiving it. And that is challenging. And I loved what you said, because that is it. Like, it's sanctifying. I think it's that way on purpose. I think God designs it so it's like, bro, you think if we could game it, we wouldn't try? Because we would, right? And it would rob us of the point that like it's God's work and not ours. Ours is to be faithful to the calling, and it requires a constant, to your point, a constant presence of like, what am I doing? What am I doing it for? How am I approaching this? Am I commoditizing something that is not a commodity to be bought or sold or traded? Am I, yeah. So I can imagine that shift for you must have been really, that must have been a
Oh
total mind
yeah.
warp.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I still tackle with it sometimes because my innate measure of success is still trying to push for that recognition, to chase the numbers in name of effectiveness. So if I'm not careful, then I'm going to be building whatever I'm building, not for it to be holy, but just going back to hollow. And
Yeah.
that's not, why I came into this. So yeah, it's something you got to just check up on yourself every single day, really.
Yeah, it's
You know,
crazy.
one of the things that I'm interested in with as it pertains to marketing and the culture that we are experiencing today, it seems like in the last 5 years or so, Christianity has become cool again. And so it's starting to be more prevalent in some of these circles. I think it's very closely tied with a lot of times politics. And so it's like these political talking heads are also Christians, but then more people are interested about that aspect of their life and how that guides their politics. And so there's like kind of a distinction there. And so I thought that was really interesting to see like that there's a market for like Christian podcasts. Like I can't imagine that what we're doing would have been able to be accomplished or even gotten any views, more than 5 years ago, just because like who wants to talk about theology? Like snore, like who cares, right? for the average person. But at the same time, from a marketing perspective, so I work in privacy, and I'm want to think like, what's it like? I mean, so I do want you to comment on the culture and the shift and why marketing Christianity has kind of shifted and seemed to open up, but also from a privacy perspective, like how often would you get complaints that you're marketing Jesus? Like, I mean, just one of the things, like, because you got to make sure that you're not harassing people and you're not reaching out to people who don't opt into communications. But like, I mean, who's going to say, oh man, can you stop telling me about Jesus? Like, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, man, it is interesting. Like I have found all these different nuances, and stepping into Christianity today, it is cross-denominational, and even within the faith,
right.
there's all these there's all these differences on how we see certain things. So as we are like moving into, politics being seen more with like a Christianity lens, right? And we have a lot of people bringing all these things into the national spotlight that are warranting these conversations as to what it takes to be a Christian and the shaping of American life. Then you've got like pop culture, and you've got like, Jordan Peterson, who's kind of just wrestling around this whole idea and like
Who
dragging
doesn't
us
want to
along.
commit,
Yeah,
doesn't want to
yeah.
get baptized.
It just
He
won't,
believes, but
right?
he doesn't want to get baptized.
No,
So,
and we're like holding on to this.
I
Um,
mean,
it is crazy. Like Russell Brand, like who would have expected,
right?
that to happen? So the conversations are there, and I think I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think it's great. We're having momentum. Christian media is increasing. The Chosen is in theaters, and they had the best viewership out of all the seasons.
Oh yeah.
House
The
of David.
kids House of David, #1 TV show on Amazon.
It's because
Angel
they introduced
Studios with
the
the King
the
of
Nephilim
Kings.
into it. So just
Yeah.
a point of
I
fact.
haven't, yeah, yeah. I haven't seen the whole series yet, just the first 2 episodes. But
Oh man,
it's good.
Good.
I
It's a
just
good one.
finished it. It's very good.
Yep.
Oh,
Very good.
nice, nice.
Oh,
Yeah,
One
so
one thing.
good
Go
things are
ahead,
happening.
Marlon. Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, one thing that I mean, to this point specifically, and as a marketer, Marlon, I'm curious what you think about it. And as a new believer, I'm curious what you think about it. Because one of the things we've been talking about on this podcast is that it is going to be too easy to get swept up in the bandwagon of this moment, even on the evangelical side of things. And so one of our core values is to really have a bedrock in foundation, truth, goodness, beauty, not trying to, lean into the clickbait of it. And I think that's curious for me as someone who did grow up in the church and who has been a Christian as long as I can remember, where I think for our podcast, for others like us, we do, and I would like to hear your take on this, but I think we offer something valuable to the current cultural moment, and that is stability and truth and transparency and gentleness, and I would even say openness and honesty, where we're not getting on some soapbox projecting some political view or some like overly dogmatic component, but it's like we're sticking to the efficacy of the truth of Scripture, but we're also not afraid to talk about the hard things. What do you think about that?
No, yeah, I mean, and it's super important because it's almost like, a funnel. You have all these people that are coming in. They're just freshly converted Christians. They're excited about it. They're new in faith. And there's a point in time where you start to want to know, like, what does it take to live this spiritually led life? And you start to look up to people. And I've been reading through Galatians, and it just like speaks to me so much because it's very relevant to right now. But at that point in time, you have the Galatians, and um, they're new into faith, and then Paul is urgently cautioning them to not drift. And
Right.
at that point in time, you could only imagine like these new Christians so excited, and then you have people that are coming in like Paul, like Peter, right? And you look up to Peter, and he was one of the disciples, and you're like, I want to be a better Christian, and you look up to someone like that, only later to see, Paul confronting him because Peter is bringing in the ways of legalism. And
Right.
it's so strong when Paul comes back and says, not even if an angel came or one of us came and gave you a different gospel,
So important.
should you believe
Yeah.
it? And that's the nuance that we're living in right now. Like, it's good to have these voices that are true because there's so much influence right now, like pop theology and adding in this new world theology into what our
Yeah.
gospel is. So it's important to have this because there's a lot of people that are looking for this.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, and it's good. It's good to hear that because even talking about like what Nick was talking about in terms of like the tone of the show, but even one of the things that we looked at was what I've seen as a pastor is there's only so much that we can talk about from the pulpit. You know, like I'm not going to get up on Sunday morning and talk about Russell Brand's conversion and like and slog through that and have the back. You're not going to have those things. And the sad part is that a lot of new believers are becoming so, but their lives, especially if you're older, right? Like your friends are your friends. Your
Yeah.
job environment is your job environment. These aren't things you can easily and quickly retool to surround yourself with a Christian community and discipleship, 360 discipleship coming from different directions if you don't have anything deliberate. And a lot of young men and women do not have the ability to sit down in a room with mature believers and just talk about what's going on in the world today. And so we get a lot of people, I get a lot of people who message me and even some of my family and stuff. They're like, oh, well, you should do more deep theology stuff, or you should do, why do you always have to go off the news cycle? And I'm like, look, man, there's a church with a pulpit that's going to handle that. And there's a guy
Yeah.
who did a video essay that is so much better and has so much more time to do that.
We have so many resources now.
I think, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this as well, but it's like, I do think a lot of people try to do all of the things instead of, finding that niche of, hey, yeah, it's okay if we're just a conversation that is biblically based, that's taking the angle, and we have this discussion all the time in our chat where like something will happen and we'll be like, we should totally talk about this, and we're excited about it, but the angle that we try to stick to is like, how are we helping understand, like equip the saints for the work of the kingdom, Ephesians 4. Like how are we, what is there that we can say about this that is edifying and is going to build a believer to go forward? What are they going to take out of this conversation? And that is cool because it keeps us away from politics a lot of times, or especially, it keeps us out of a lot of stuff that's really helped us constrain. So I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on like, sticking to a niche or going big versus staying narrow?
No, I think there's definitely a lot of room for culture conversations. There's a lot of, people, and they grow up in faith and then they go and deconstruct faith. And that's, something that people are watching. But the deconstruction of culture, like, you have to remember people are living with the world and they have no idea of truth. So you have certain belief systems that are coming in from the culture, the things you watch, all the media, and even if you're interpreting religion and faith, it's going to be through the lens of what culture has brought onto you. So having a space and environment where you're hearing people that are seasoned and talking about these things, it allows you to see different perspectives. And at least for me, someone that's still new in faith, in First Timothy, when uh, Paul mentions that spiritual leaders must not be recent converts, or they become conceited to fall in the same condemnation as the devil. That was big because there was a certain sense of like, hey, should I be doing this because I'm so new? But it also keeps me humble, because I have to recognize that I'm in a stage right now where I'm still trying to become wise. I've had a lot of like intelligence from what I've learned in life, and I've kind of
Yeah.
navigated my way around and all that. But I haven't been wise. I've only had 2 years of actually knowing truth. So I have to really surround myself with a good environment, and the Lord has been kind to me in that. And I'm surrounded by a great community with church, a pastor who's not just a preacher on stage, he's a friend. Our
Mhm.
families are close. We all meet up often. And through work now, surrounded by theologians and
Yeah.
mentors and being around this, because it's gonna take a long time for me to actually, you know, feel like I've got it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, well,
Yeah.
even Paul went to Arabia for 2 years after he encountered Jesus, before he went to Jerusalem, and
Yeah.
still checked his theology. And he said, they added nothing to me. Like, I got it
Dude,
right. So there is
Yeah.
a humbleness
that's
there that even Paul was like, hey, I encountered Jesus face to face, but I'm still going to check up and have the humility to say, hey, did I get this right? Am I preaching in vain?
and this is the conversation. This has really been a large part of the conversation on all these celebrity conversions, right? And I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that is what I was even talking with my dad about this after we did the episode last week. You become a Christian and you're a grown man. You want to take what you want to redeem who you are as a person, right? And so, like you said, you have wisdom, you have this skill, you have this ability. I want to do this for the kingdom. You look at somebody like Russell Brand or Jordan Peterson. Like, these are not young men. They are older. They have experience. They have maturity. And oh, by the way, they have a following because people like how they communicate. They're effective communicators. So it's so easy to see how you could slide into that. Like, well, now I'm just going to do this for the kingdom, and completely not realize, like, it's not that you can't use your platform and your tools and your skills. It's how you're speaking and who you're speaking for and what you're taking on. You can't step into the same authority you had in that capacity. Someone like, and I really think I want to commend not Jordan Peterson, but the other one,
Russell Brand.
Russell Brand. Yeah. I really think that Russell Brand has done a really great job of speaking into culture and talking about
Yeah.
Christianity without assuming the role of the teacher, which I
Yeah.
think is, I'm not saying he hasn't occasions, but like, I think it's got to be very difficult. So I can imagine
There's a
in your
level of
capacity.
humility there.
Yeah, so much.
Yeah. There's so much rawness, and sometimes it's nice to be part of someone's testimony and seeing them as they progress out, and that's what I get when I see his videos and his takes. He's learning alongside everyone,
Yeah.
which is good to see as well. But you got to
Yeah,
be careful. There's a lot of influencers. There's a lot of people out there that kind of just overnight they're already, preaching from TikTok. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of areas where you kind of have to make sure you're grounded.
Yeah, for
and I
sure.
mean, to be frank, Marlon, I want to commend you truly, honorably, for your humble posture of quoting those scriptures and acknowledging your brain knowledge, but then your new posture in the faith. And it is not a hierarchical statement, but it is a posture of humility before the Lord. And I think he is smiling at that, and I think
Yeah.
he
Appreciate
appreciates
that.
that. And I think we want that for everyone. And I think that speaks back to the, like, hey, slow down, take a step, remember that what we're doing is for the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And like, this isn't about any of us. Everything is to glorify him. Everything. Like, to him be the glory constantly. And Marlon, I would love if you're willing, like, speaking of that humble posture you have, and the time even now that you're spending in the word, what has your story been that led to just 2 years ago you coming to faith? I would love to hear that.
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to share it. So growing up, I grew up in Miami, My parents are Nicaraguan. I was a first generation American, so I had to figure a lot of things out. And I grew up Catholic by culture more than anything else. A lot of tradition. We went to church. I did my sacraments, did CCD, and I liked it as a kid. It was a good environment. I liked the stories. I liked learning. But just like many people, hit my teenage years, that started to fade. Around 15, I started drifting. The Miami party scene was really enticing. And that's really when I started becoming a child of the world. Went into college as a first generation American, like understanding what that was even like. Joined a fraternity, try to find my identity and in many different things. And then from there, after college, landed a great job, and I met my wife there. And that started me on a journey of like, okay, what does this mean now that I'm a husband? And for many years, tried to figure out what that was. My kids came. I have two kids. My daughter's 8. My son is 4. Amazing, amazing. And when they were born, I felt like there was this hole that I had of like, there's something I need to figure out so that I can be better for them. And I tried like the new age stuff, went to like men's retreats and trying to figure out what I needed to really focus on, and nothing will kind of crack it. It was just this constant lingering thing. And my wife, after 2020, she started feeling called, and at that point in time, like she couldn't explain it to me beyond emotion, and I wasn't supportive about it. I was like, why do you believe? Like, what got into you? And she would just tell me, like, I just know God is real. Like,
Mm.
he's there, and
Wow.
that wasn't enough for me. I needed logic, I needed evidence. So after my grandmother passed away, I was out running an errand, and there was a little Christian bookstore, and it somehow felt connected to just go in there, get some peace. And I wasn't really there to look for any answers. I just thought, hey, I would pop in there, maybe buy my wife a cross necklace to show that I've supported. um and then
We've all been
Hey,
there.
just
hey,
yeah.
that's a good husband, right? Good husband
I
move,
know,
right?
right? I was trying.
I'll
trying.
satisfy your
Yeah,
thing right now, honey.
for real.
Go.
And then I ended up in the apologetics section, and I was just like curious and reading about that. And I think that's what started it, because that was giving me the logic that I felt like I was missing. And it was just so
Mhm.
much evidence there. So I started reading books first about God, because I needed to understand like the creator of the universe, and then went on into reading about Christ and his historical evidence, and then also his evidence as God. And then I finally had that bridge. So we ended up shopping for churches, and we ended up in a really great one where the sermon just kind of spoke to me. And I still wasn't ready. So I reached out to the pastor, and I was like, hey, let's get breakfast. And I just laid out all my doubts on him. And I was like, hey, this Christianity stuff, like,
Let's
I'm
go.
still not there, but can you walk me through all this? And he kind of guided me onto how to start reading the Bible. And after that, that was it. Like, it was just starting to grow really fast. The more I got
Praise
into it,
God. That's
it was
awesome.
amazing. It was
It's like that's
amazing.
in the Bible somewhere. That's amazing.
It's so good.
Power of God into salvation, man.
Oh
That's
Love
man,
it.
it
awesome,
was
man.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, well, little background for me is I went to college for Christian apologetics in my seminary degree,
Oh,
and that
nice.
was one of the areas in which I encountered the biggest struggle in my Christian life. I mean, I grew up in church, very similar to Josh. My dad was a pastor, and we were just consumed with it. And one of the things that was very difficult for me is going to school and trying to defend the faith, and so it was so hard. And anyway, but like the idea of like, I just want to find the reason, the mental stumbling block that I encounter. And after kind of encountering Christian apologetics, I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's a reason for this belief beyond just the heart, that the mind can also be satisfied as well. So I love to hear that that's the intro, right? It helps overcome that stumbling block, that mental stumbling block, to say, okay, let me ask this more. And I love that it culminated in a conversation with a pastor. And I'll say, hey, that's the best thing for a pastor. But like, hey, can we go get breakfast? He's like, right on, let's go. I'd love to get out of the office. Let's go and get breakfast.
Well, that is so important, and this is my challenge, because speaking of data, right? Like, I'm so thankful at least YouTube gives us that, because I can see, like, we know who, like, generally speaking, who watches this show, right? Like, a lot of you are our age. You're between like 20 and 40, and you're men. Predominantly 30s, really.
If
20
you're
and
a
30
woman
something.
here, shout out.
And we love you too, and we're welcome. But I can see the majority, right? Like, we know who it is. And this is what's important, like if you've been walking with God for a long time, you cannot underestimate the impact of seeing a young man who you haven't seen before, who maybe not have a lot of people, and just taking him to breakfast, have a conversation with a person who is, because everybody's got questions, especially if you're somebody who's grown up in the church or you have some kind of background or you're a mature believer. Man, like, give them this podcast, for goodness sakes. Like, give them tools, like, have conversations, talk to them about it, and let them find their way. Because Marlon, I'm sure, it sounded like from your story anyway, but like, that's connecting those dots. It's like, they've got to be ready, right? Like, the heart has to be in a place to receive, the tilled soil, right? But once that's happened, seeds get planted, but it's got to get nurtured. I mean, that's discipleship. And that's our collective responsibility. And I love to hear stories of that. And I also want to point out that everybody thinks it's like we get focused into one or the other, right? Like, it's all this. Like, I've got to take the mental assent route, and I've got to be really studied on my apologetics. Well, hey, apologetics play a role. Like looking at your story, right? Like, you found the apologetics section. It does help. It does, but then also relationship, right? And then also a good sermon at the pulpit. And that's what I love about your story, is it really, you can see the effect of kind of Josh, all the things happening.
It's amazing. And I think you also have seen this and witnessed this. There's two events that tend to happen in men's life, especially, is them having children. It changes their hearts, 100%. Changes their minds, and experiencing death in the family. Those are two things where it's like you are transported outside of yourself, and you're like, wow, this is not about me. This is something more. I want to be better. And like you had said, Marlon, there was a hole there that you couldn't fill. Yeah.
Which by the way is a frustrating thing with marketing Christianity, because here's the reality is, like, you ultimately, like, you got to get people. We spend a lot of our time avoiding things that make us think about mortality and our insufficiency. We do it subconsciously. So, and to be perfectly frank, like, that's part of the reason I'm in the Army as a chaplain, is because I'm in a place where we're dealing with those things constantly. And so people, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's cheating, like, I get to work in well-tilled soil, but out in the outside, it's different, because you're trying to bring somebody something that they not only don't know that they need, they don't even want to think about the thing that will bring them to that place. Right? That's tough.
Actually, that's a good segue, Marlon. I'm curious, what is your, this is a little bit of a technical term, what is your methodology now for marketing in the evangelical community with this?
Good question.
Like,
how do we grow our
that's
channel?
a good one.
That's right. That is not.
We are here for you, and also for us, but for you.
It's a joke.
No, so it actually helps that I have a tech background, and I think a lot of areas in ministry, we always have to balance things out, and we have environments where there may not be as rigid goal structure set in place, or you don't have the data component, because you still need it. You don't want to be relying on that or be led by it, but you want to see everything.
Yeah.
So I'm taking the same learnings that I've taken from these startups and figured out, if we look at everything through the funnel and try to have this customer journey where we're having a touch point across the entire cycle, and we have people dedicated to each cycle, then you can see that momentum and you can start to measure that growth through that. So that remains the same. The processes and the rituals around growth marketing, which is the area that I was in, have now remained the same. But the difference is that there's, prayer incorporated as a team. That was something that was very new to me. And like that time to really understand what it is that we're trying to do as it accords to the mission. So it's not just the data. It's like, okay, what is the bigger impact that we're having? If we're bringing all these people in, what are we going to do with them? Is it just to say we got a lot of views? Is it to say that we've got an increase in followers? But what is that journey continue looking like? So it's just adding layers to like already existing marketing processes that allow me to think outside of the rigidity that I had before that was just focused on the numbers.
No, I think that's really good, because 20 years ago, the marketing conversion metric was baptisms and salvations. and
Still
we
that.
20 years
see
ago.
What do you mean 20 years ago? You mean, yeah, maybe for
still
20% of the churches it's not.
That's right.
But for
okay.
80%, that is 100% what the current metric is.
It's still around.
Maybe
it's
it
still
shouldn't be.
around. It's still around. But my point is, and I'd love to get Marlon your perspective on this, because I, equally would love to share as well. But it's something deeper and richer now, and I think the Christian faith has matured in the West. I'm hopeful. I want to believe that this is the case, or at least it's heading in this direction, which is it is not just, dunk some water on them, send them away, and we're good. Let's go on to the next. It's this edification. It's this stewardship. It's this growing in wisdom and understanding. And so, to your point around marketing metrics and views, and like, how do you guys see that, or how do you as a marketer see that when it comes to the faith? Because you're not looking to like, how many baptisms can we get out the door and then we're done, converted, on to the next, and we have our cost per conversion. It's this lifetime value of stewardship, edification, and training of the saints for the mission. So I'm curious how you see that.
Yeah. So that's a really good question, and that's one that I'm tackling right now to really understand from a mission perspective, how is it that we're measuring the success? Because I've got the numbers, I can see like the whole funnel from a marketing angle. So a lot of this is going to be relying on that qualitative data of being able to take surveys of people, in our case, of readers, and seeing what they're getting out of it, what they feel like they're missing out of it, and it's okay too to be in an area which is where we should be, of like trying to take elements of culture and also not be tied to one side or the other. So getting even that feedback of them pushing back is also important to see the types of conversations that are taking place. So it is something that I'm still trying to work through and figure out, because it's one of those things. It's just the impact on the long term cannot be something that's so measured, especially if you have a touch point and you're taking part of maybe planting the seed, but the sowing may require many different touch points. So
There it is.
it's good to just do it.
Yeah, because you own a part of it. Like, that's the ultimate problem. It's like, in a community, in a small community, if you were a church, then you could say like, hey, we're producing content that is drawing people, that's helping cultivate and develop people. We can see that through our small groups or through our in-church community and in a small contract. But when you're a brand like CT that has a global reach, you're literally just flinging out, and you don't get to reap that final part of the cycle to really quantify on the back end what is happening. And I can imagine that's,
I would say, to your point, Josh, that I think that's where the beauty of the body actually comes in, and something that we actually have to offer as Christians to the world today is this isn't a single, like, this is not like the I'm Telling God About This podcast is not your source, your only source, the source for the gospel. It is, we are wanting to do a good job of representing the body, the community, and it is not a one and done. It is, I am now on the path, and this path doesn't end until the other side of death. And I think that equally, even for me as a marketer, as someone in ministry as well, who is operating nationally at a much smaller scale than CT, of, it's helped our ministry have that long-term vision. And so I have this joke in our ministry of like, we're going to be here forever, and that's how everyone's going to know our name. And like, it is a different modeling when it comes to that, because yes, we're measuring metrics. Yes, we're measuring views. Yes, we're measuring conversions or small groups or whatever the work is that you're doing, or readership. But I do find fulfillment in my work. It's equally, it could be crushing or fulfilling. The crushing part is this never ends. The fulfilling part is it's not all on my shoulders.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
for sure.
Oh man, doing hard things is like, man, that's I think that's the big thing that a lot of believers can't wrap their head around, and something I try to push people to. And I mean, to be honest, like, that's the kind of content I want to see more of in general, is stuff that takes people out of the self-development space and into the outward development space, because I think that's been where Christianity's been living. And there's a difference between I'm not talking about churches in the out development, I'm talking about Christians in the discipleship business. And we talk about what we've had this conversation in our church episode is like, I think the only metric that we get for as a church, or I think the best metric for an individual of like, hey, are you doing well? Are you maturing in your faith? Is who you're discipling. Like, what does your external development, look like? And because I don't think you really get the context, and I don't think you take advantage of all of the inward work or even see the relevance of it until you're under that pressure. So like Nick, when you said it can be crushing but also fulfilling, I don't think it's fulfilling unless it's crushing. Like I don't think you can take one without the other. And so I would love, that's, some people say that I have, me and Tim, when he's here, tend to have a little bit more of like a prophetic, like, pushing tone, and we balance each other out well. But that's because I know, right? But I want people to experience, like, no, go do the hard thing. Like lean into the thing that's difficult. Embrace the fact that it's going to be uncomfortable, because it's in that you're going to find the deepest fulfillment. And then that fulfillment's what carries you through. Like, that's the thing that you find yourself longing for in seasons of like peace, so to speak, Yeah.
It's so much truth in that. I think for me, I witnessed a lot of that after the layoff, and just it was a test of my faith. And really, I had been praying for an opportunity where everything would be aligned, but at the same time, I never wanted to go and pursue it, because I didn't want to let go of how I was comfortable with the money I was making, and how my family was living. So when that layoff happened and we just had to take through, okay, what does this look like? Or we're going to have to budget now. We're going to have to do all these different elements. It was hard, but at the same time, it was what I needed in order to step to where I'm at right now. It needed to happen. And I'm part of Stephen Ministry, so we're, as lay people, just provide support to people that are in emotional need. And one of the things there that we are taught is that we should be guiding people to go through the crucible. There's a lot that can happen there. We just have to be walking alongside them, not necessarily be trying to like fix a situation or anything like that. So that image for me allows me now to have the courage to be like, I don't know what we're gonna do. How is this gonna work out? How is this gonna play in the long run? But we should pursue it, and going into that route, knowing that it's gonna be hard, but that reward is gonna be so much better. And it's also tied to one thing that really helps is a big mission, like having a mission and values that you really believe in for what you're doing. Ours was built by Billy Graham, like 1956. So there's a legacy there that you're also trying to continue on. So those are all factors into, the ability to go through hard seasons and going through all that.
Yeah, that's so good. And one thing I want to say, because for the listener here that isn't working in ministry, Marlon, I love your job, and I'm in ministry, and Josh Hughes is in ministry. Anderson, you are not. You can speak into this as well tremendously. This is my point. I think we want to, on this podcast, to not create a pedestal of the blessing some of us might have in working in ministry, because it doesn't mean that we're better or special. It's the calling God put on our lives. It's the door he opened before us, but it's not the Holy Grail, because I think there's even more of an important message to be shared. And that is this thing we've been talking about, this journey we've been talking about, our faith of pursuing Jesus and making him first and giving glory to God in everything that we're constantly doing. Like when I was a roofer, that was number one. When I was a janitor, that was number one. And yes, now I randomly fell into a purity ministry, but it's like Anderson, like speak to that just for a minute, because man, your insight's so valuable here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't necessarily work in ministry, much to the chagrin of the Army chaplaincy and Josh Hughes, but I was, but then here we go. But where God is calling me right now, I mean, like I look at it as a ministry, but I also look at it as just like, this is the area that I'm in, right? I am called to be a light in the darkness, right? And and one of the things that I keep looking to when people ask, what do I do? How do I disciple somebody? It's not like somebody's just going to come to me. And I think God gives us all gifts according to 1 Corinthians 12. Like, he's given everybody a gift to edify the body. And so it's identifying that gift that you have and utilizing it. And so God's given me a passion for apologetics, and I created, and it was actually really spawned out of a Bible study group that we had in Maryland when I met this Yahoo over here in the Navy when we were when we were in the Navy, before we were commissioned officers. I know, right? When we were in the Navy, we had a Bible study, and one of the things that we went over, and Josh actually challenged me, he's like, hey, I think you should come up with like an apologetics series. We can start off. We went over doctrine. Let's go over some apologetics. Let's see what, and I created these videos, because I had a little bit of background in video editing. And so I created these videos that I ended up publishing on YouTube, because I'm like, well, let's do something. And it got, thousands of views. And I've had people reach out to me. There was a guy that reached out to me on Facebook, because I guess I didn't know how to DM on YouTube.
So it's not just Nick.
Yeah, no. It's not just Nick. But this guy reached out to me, and he's like, hey, I'm a Harvard grad, and I was really struggling in my faith, and I had that intellectual roadblock, and your videos really helped me seek out, some discipleship. It's like, whoa, like, who am I? Yeah. Right?
That's amazing.
You don't know what you do for the ministry that has a long-lasting impact. And so that's ultimately, if you don't work in ministry, if you are constantly seeking the face of God and doing the work of discipleship, your impact is going to be beyond what you can see. So
for sure.
That's what I would say there.
Blessings. This is so good. I love this conversation so much. Hughes?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I tell people all the time, just to reaffirm what Nick said, and triple tap, double click. What were we saying?
All the clicks.
What's the executive terminology?
Triple click, whatever.
Triple click.
I always say that I think that God putting me in ministry was like mercy. It wasn't. It's not. Listen, like I said, I have easy mode. I work with a bunch of I work with the military. It's pre-tilled soil, and I get to do this full time because frankly, like, I'm too ADD to split focus two different ways. And I think God knows that, and he gave that, and that's a mercy. So yeah, I completely agree. I think doing what God has called us to do, to make disciples as individuals, which is the work of the church. And I just want to make sure everybody understands this. Like, the church's job, Ephesians 4, is to equip the saints for the work of the kingdom. The saints, you guys, people who are not in full-time ministry, your job is the work of the gospel. So like, that's your job, my job as a believer, right? Like, my job is just to help you do that. Like, I'm not the professional Christian who goes out and seeks the lost. Like, that's not the game. Like, my job, Nick's job, pastor's jobs, even your job, Marion, in this instance, is to equip the saints for the ministry, right? So if you're sitting here saying, I don't get paid to do ministry, well, you're still in full-time business, so I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Like, it's all of our work, right? So yeah, don't have that complex, that's for sure. All right.
Marlon, thank you so much. I would love to leave you with any final words for our listeners, or any just wisdom and insight. Anything you got for us?
If you have a following anywhere that people can find you or anything.
Yeah, yeah. How can people follow you, connect with you?
Yeah, so I don't know, and I didn't have like a closure statement or anything like that I was thinking through.
No, you're good.
So but it was awesome to just connect with you guys, talk through this. I think it's an important time that we're living in right now. There's just so much happening, and there's a lot as Christians that we should be doing out there. If we were to know for sure that Christ was coming, and our Lord was coming, and we knew for sure the date, and it'd be 2 years from now, then I'm sure that we would be using this opportunity right now to try to make sure that all those knees that will bow are going to be, legitimate followers, and then they're not going to be swayed by anything. So we have a bigger responsibility right now as the change and culture is taking place, and I love the conversation we had, because we all take part in it. We are all little pieces of that bigger puzzle.
Yeah.
Amen.
But
Amen.
Awesome.
Bless you, Marlon. It's been a gift having you with us, man. And I think the the culmination of this point is your testimony, is the stories we're seeing, where it was how many seeds planted and how many people saying yes and being obedient at different components. Whoever launched and started the bookstore, the pastor that was, committed to the truth of the preaching, to being available to sit down for a breakfast, the, community around you. Like, all of these touch points are how we as believers can feel and are called. And for the listener out there, like, I would encourage you, like, you are in the business of planting seeds. That's it. And God brings the harvest. This has been another amazing episode of the I'm Telling God About This podcast. If you're still here, we are honored. Like and subscribe. If you have a cool story and you want to be featured, hop into the DMs. We'd be honored to have you, and share this with someone who you think needs to hear this story.
Till next time.
Awesome, guys. See ya.
Get off my lawn. You can't gaslight us. We know you want to talk about receipts. I got human history and Western civilization. All you have 20 years of dumpster fires, purple hair, people who don't know which bathroom to go into. Get off my lawn.